Hi, can you hear me? Hi, good evening. My name is Ashwani Singla, not Singh, and I'm not them, I'm I, we. I'm here. So there's no multiple people here. And thank you for the time today. Thanks, Exchange for Media, Dr. Batra, Karan, for providing this opportunity. An interesting session of impact. I founded this company in 1998 in a small Barsati, and we wrote the first software for impact around 2000, and then I got a little challenged, and God sent me Asim. And as part of, and Asim, as you know, is a former McKinsey guy, and he had done, and Bhuvnesh, who was my chief marketing officer at that time, told me, hey, this guy, he's done a project on media measurement and media monitoring, and he's been looking at, and nobody seems to be investing in it. And I said, look, this is manna from heaven, right? Because the reason we founded Impact was not to monitor media, but to actually create the first ever analytics to help clients make sense of the news that they were generating. So I'm absolutely delighted, and it gives me a great pride to be able to follow such a wonderful session of great speakers, and more importantly, professing and propagating the use of data and insights. So congratulations to all of you on the dais, and it's a great honor to be here, because what I'm going to talk to you about today is in a very interesting subject. You know, earlier this year, we launched the ESG practice. So we do real-time ESG consulting on greenhouse emission, carbon neutrality, and Aditya here, who's one of our principals, is an economist, environmental economist from London School of Economics. He runs our ESG practice. So that's the E part of it. But there's an S and a G. Well, most people tend to confuse that ESG is only about climate. But ESG is environment, social impact, and governance. And I'm going to talk today about a very important part of ESG, which is CSR, or social impact. Now, we've been, obviously, Astrum is a science-based reputation management advisory, and all our work is rooted in science. And we talk about the trifecta of science. One, quantitative science, data, whatever you may want to call it quantitative science. Qualitative science, which is social science, anthropology, ethnography, that's social science. And the third part is neuroscience, which is really around the psychology and how psychology aids persuasion. And all of that we combine to create campaigns for our clients, which obviously start from the fundamental problem of what is your objective, what do you really want to achieve, and in the end, how will you measure what you want to achieve. And therefore, when I talk to you about what I'm talking to you about today, is really around understanding CSR better. Now, I'm not going to sit here and be an expert and tell you I know everything about CSR. We've studied this subject for the last year plus. What I'm sharing with you is probably the most definitive study that has happened on the CSR space. We've got 2,000 interviews, of which close to 1,900 are beneficiaries. And the rest come from the ecosystem of CSR, donors, participants, government officers, CSR heads. So you'll see all of that here. But I'll tell you that this is 2,000 interviews across the country. So it gives you a very definitive data point and an insight to be able to share with you why we think CSR today is transactional and what does it need to do to move to a transformative CSR. All right? Because the whole idea around CSR is around impact. Right? What is social impact? I think first and foremost, it's important to understand social impact before we try to understand transformation. Well, first rule, good CSR, not a medicine for bad business. Right? So you cannot hide your follies behind CSR. हमारे हिंदी में बोलते थे ना, सबसे बड़ा चोर सबसे बड़ा दानी होता था, बट वो चोर चोर ही रहता है, दानी बनने से चोरी कम नहीं हो जाती है. So good business makes sense first before you think about good CSR. So it's not a cover. I think that's an important element to think about, the fact that it cannot be a substitute for good business. We do need to do good business, right? What's change? Let's understand transformative change, right? Change, first and foremost, is the reality of people's life, right? So when you think about an impact on a large group of people, solving a real life challenge through a localized approach in a sustainable manner, then it can be looked at as transformation, because it changes lives, it creates change. And there are definitions in which you can think about. One, right? Number one, well, there has to be a holistic improvement in the quality of lives. When we talk about sustainability in sustainable lives and sustainable livelihoods, you are really trying to improve the quality of life. Two, well, you don't offer fish, you teach people how to fish. So you got to think about self-empowerment in that entire process. So good CSR is not about check writing, clearly. It's about actually working in the communities in which you want to serve. And having consulted several amount of clients around aid, emergency aid, disaster relief, there are a lot of insights around disaster relief, and that will be a 2-hour session by itself. But clearly, there is a role that good CSR can play in disaster relief and crisis. An important element of good CSR is be a role model program to influence policy. And I'm not talking about advocacy. It's so good that the government wants to replicate it in other elements and other parts of the geographies. That's the role a transformative change has in public policy. So first and foremost, understanding transformation change will show you that we're not talking of a transactional intervention for 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, 9 months, and a year, because you can't change lives in 6 months to 8 months. With me? Yes? Now, we did talk to 1900 beneficiaries, right? So here's a look at what beneficiaries really want in their voices. Who are we? And what do we really want? Right? I'm not going to read that out to you. I'm going to take a pause for you to be able to reflect on it. But there are some very important insights here. Dignity, respect, empower us, enable us. Don't do philanthropy. Right? So when you understand and embed your programs in the context of the beneficiaries, what does it really mean? It means you need deep insights. Abhi had data. Data can be converted into insights, and insights lead to inferences and interpretations. And therefore, when you have deep insights, you can relate to the needs of the communities and therefore build programs that are meaningful to the communities, not a passion project of your CEO. Or an international CSR program whose leg needs to be extended into India because we are a global multinational and we need to do good. Or I've got to put 2% corporate profit in my CSR disclosure, so I need to spend some money. That's not transformative. Unfortunately, large amount of CSR today is just this. And therefore, it's transactional and not transformative. And it's little wonder that only 3% of private enterprises are seen to be the face of change. It's not a surprise. We are not the face of change. NGOs largely are seen as drivers of change. Now, you could argue, but we work through NGOs and there are our partners, so they could be the face, but you're absent. Right? And then we say, hey, good CSR needs to be a reputation asset. People don't know you. You want me to do business with you? So there is clearly an imperative today to change the lens. And I am, ladies and gentlemen, today arguing in front of you, it's time to change NGO word or any other word that we want to think about. But when you're doing good, you need to think of yourself as a social impact organization. Because if you're thinking yourself as a social impact organization, you are an SIO, then your focus and your purpose is first right. Which means if you're on the right road, chances are you'll get to your destination. But you aren't in the right road, there's no way you're going to get to your destination. And there's a lot of time and money and effort that you would have wasted, and you would make some fancy, nice CSR sustainability reports, but you really won't make any change. So important for you to first think about the fact of what's the lens that you want to shift, right? So what does it take? Challenges, too many things, two distractions, funding for 6 months, then withdrawn. Transactionals will create impediments, and you won't really be able to make any kind of change because you won't have the right focus or the right resources to stay sustained in a community to be able to create that transformation. So I want you to not read the whole thing because you can download this report. We'll give you a card later. It is a business card which has a QR code, and you can go to our LinkedIn page and download the full copy of this report. I'm only making an excerpt here. I just want you to read the first line. And you think about what is important to measure. What's important to measure? Transparency, capability, and an effective implementation strategy. And so on and so forth. And it goes down, but nothing goes less than 25%, which means that's pretty significant in a large sample size. They're not inconsequential in its data, right? Therefore, it's important to understand which partner you're working with. And does that partner have the right capabilities to be able to create the change that you want to see? Or are you just at a transactional level and you get the milestones and say, yeah, we've done some good work. And the community is left wondering who came and what did they do and why us? Nothing really changed for us in the end analysis. So let's talk about transaction to transformation. What do we really need to do? What are the big shifts that we're thinking about? Hey, not community interventions, which is most of the time I use, this is the lexicon I hear, community intervention. We need community intervention. We don't need community intervention. We need to transform lives of our communities, right? And therefore, from transactional to tactical, we need to go from sustained effort, right? And so forth. I'll take 5 more minutes before we get, because I believe the next session is on CSR. This will be an absolutely wonderful input for that session to reflect upon. So we've created a social impact focus framework which looks at fundamentally 3 things: marrying the organizational core beliefs and needs with that of the communities, along with that of the agenda of the nation. When you think about the 3 overlapping, intersecting circles, you're able to zone in on what should be your CSR focus. And then when you think about management, there is a framework. There is an actual framework that we have developed, which is called the Social Impact Index, which, well, there are a lot of attributes and drivers hidden under this, but this gives you a large sense of how do you measure reputational relevance to your CSR programs. What are the drivers, dimensions that people will look at? And we've been talking about the Great Reputation Reboot in any case, which talks about the fact that compliance is a very important element of today's activity for business, right? Again, when you think about expectations, which is really the deep dive under the hidden agenda of the SII, you will see what's your top line. And everything here is above 50%. Your biggest is the fact that you work for the greater good. If you're not seen as working for the greater good, you're certainly not going to be seen as a transformative change maker, which is really how we all want us to be seen when we actually do our CSR interventions. Well, think about challenges that need to be addressed. Use technology to your advantage. There are a lot of ways in which you can monitor and measure, and technology today allows. There's a role for AI. There was a question on whether we used AI. A lot more AI can be used, not only generative, but you can get into agentic AI and see how you can actually create measurement and implementation focus in real time. Last but not the least, what do you want to tell? What's your communication going to look like? Is it stories, stats, sound bites, but what? So think about what your stories should be. Most of the time I see numbers and milestones, not really stories of change. Right? So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for your attention. That's the end of my presentation. I hope it was meaningful to you. Copy of the report will be available. We'll distribute the cards. You can read this report at your convenience. Have a nice evening.